Hello, welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Alana. There's a hair poking me in my eyeball. This is my corner of the interwebs in which I review books, and I am a big fan of just sitting down and doing a deep dive into one book at a time, long format. So if that is your jam, holla at your girl. Go ahead on and like and subscribe. And I like to review pretty much anything. I mean, my reading taste is kind of all over the place. I prefer the classics just because there are reasons why they're classics, but I like contemporary reads as well. I do some popular reads, some every now and then just to see what the buzz is about. And I'm even getting more into lighter, fluffier reads. I am like hiccuping and burping all over the place. Reading lighter reads, fluffy reads, just for the sake of reading for fun. I do think that it's important to remind ourselves that first and foremost, we read for fun. As much as I love analyzing things, sometimes I just want to sit down with a book that isn't literary fiction or classic literature and just be swept away by some crazy characters in a fast-paced plot. That's it. So this book, this book in particular, Near to the Wild Heart by Clarice Lispector, was a book that I pinned as being one of my most anticipated reads of this year because it's Clarice Lispector, who is one of Brazil's, if not Brazil's most renowned author. She's no longer living, but I have a few Brazilian friends, and when I mentioned I was reading Clarice Lispector, they were like, "My girl, enjoy, you're in for a treat." And they were 100% right. One of my ballet mates is Brazilian, and when I said I was reading Clarice Lispector in particular, she was like, "Come back to me and tell me how you feel." She has, of course, the privilege of being able to read this in the original Portuguese. However, it's gorgeous in English regardless. Whoever translated this, give him the Nobel Peace Prize. Fantastic. Let's go ahead on and hop into this. Either I light up and am wonderful, fleetingly wonderful, or I am obscure, wrapped in curtains. If you can't tell by that sentence alone, you are in for some stunning writing. Okay, so Near to the Wild Heart by my girl Clarice. It's a force of a novel, and it's a thin one, but it's a force of a novel. And we have our narrator, Joanna. She's creative. She's very creative, but she was a very inquisitive child. And in adulthood, she continues to question things like the concepts of truth, her identity, and she has these inner passions. She's married, so we're getting some of these flashbacks to her childhood and what her childhood was kind of like, but really what her disposition was. She is one of those people who questions everything, never takes anything at surface level. She's almost thinks too much. She's so smart that she's misunderstood because she looks so deeply into things. And so we do get some flashbacks to her childhood, but we also get her married life, and her husband is unfaithful. But her marriage also just leaves her feeling very constricted. Joanna is one of those, I hope I'm pronouncing her name right. I'm using the English pronunciation. She's a commodity because she is introspective, and this often leaves her at odds with those around her. This novel is an existential dream. Okay, if you love an existential narrative, I am that person. If you love an existential narrative, you're going to gobble this up. Okay? So this main character, Joanna, is in a constant state of inner tension and turmoil. She teeters between this outward display of decorum sometimes, while internally she's seeking to become a woman who is unfettered by societal expectations. She has these desires and passions that she often can't even put to words. She just knows that there's something within her that's unfulfilled, unquenchable, and not satiated. She is, because of this awareness, there's this barrier that gets put up between her and others. Even if she doesn't mean to put this barrier up, her disposition can make her seem aloof and untouchable, and it affects her relationships. What else was that feeling of contained force, ready to burst forth in violence, that longing to apply it with her eyes closed, all of it, with the rash confidence of a wild beast? Only to discover her own thirst, profound and ancient. Maybe it was just a lack of life. She was living less than she could and imagined that her thirst required floods. The way she related to people was becoming increasingly different to the way she related to herself. One word, among many others. I mean, this is a novel that you could analyze for days because Lispector repeats certain themes and words over and over again on purpose. But one of the words in particular that pops up a lot in Near to the Wild Heart is beast. Again, this goes back to this pent up, unquenchable, vague desire and energy that Joanna has contained within her. She is not satisfied with the banality of life, and like an untamed animal, she just constantly feels restless. You see this in her childhood, you see this in her adult married life. She can't sit still internally. She felt a perfect animal inside her, full of contradictions of selfishness and vitality. Animal life boils down to this pursuit of pleasure. You are one of the ones that would kill to flourish. She acknowledges that she has some built up tension within herself, and she uses this knowledge, this restlessness, this awareness of this restlessness to seek out her self-identity. Again, if you're an existentialist out there, if you're a fan of existentialist philosophy, narratives, and thought, just go buy this book off this one excerpt alone that I'm about to share. This one quote. I'm telling you, you're just gonna be like, I need it and I need it now. So, and it's highly relatable because I think we've all experienced at some point in life circumstances in which we're almost scared to verbally articulate something, because once we speak it out loud, it becomes reality. And what if our words are not precise enough to actually portray what we're internally feeling or sensing? What happens when words cheapen our inner? Let me start over. What happens when our words cheapen our inner sense of self? And this is the quote that I'm talking about. That if you are an existentialist fan, who am I? My consciousness strays, but it doesn't matter. I find great serenity in hallucination. It is curious that I can't say who I am. That is to say, I know it all too well, but I can't say it. More than anything, I'm afraid to say it because the moment I try to speak, not only do I fail to express what I feel, but that I solely become what I say. It doesn't need any, I'm going to let that quote stand on its own. Let's jump into the next theme. Another major theme in this book falls right in line with everything else, is Joanna's pursuit of freedom. She particularly feels stuck and listless in her marriage to her husband, Ottavio, who is cheating on her. Okay. Faux shame, but it is what it is. But I do think that even if her husband was faithful, she would still feel disconnected from her husband, both emotionally and physically. She can't connect. And I'm almost thinking of that, just that word connect. I'm thinking of Howard's End by M. Forster, who says just connect. But she cannot connect to her husband. She is a woman who flourishes best when she's just completely untethered. Relationships, in a way, are almost more of a constraint for her. Because one always, and we all experience this, you have to alter yourself a little bit when you're interacting with people. And based on the personality, you can interact with one person one way, but then depending on another person, you have to kind of tweak something about how you're interacting with them, because everybody's different. Everybody has different senses of humor. What is not going to offend one person may offend another. I have jokes that I can tell with a few friends, but maybe can't tell the friend over here, because and not because I want to be. It's not a phoniness. I respect that this person has a different sense of humor, but there are certain things that I may have to adjust. Right? We all experience that, but Joanna in particular, it's deeper than that. She does not like having to dull herself down. Ottavio made her into something that wasn't her, but himself, in which Joanna received out of pity or for both, because both were incapable of freeing themselves through love. You will have to give up a lot in order to have others. Her blood ran through her more slowly, its pace domesticated, like a beast that has trained its steps to fit its cage. I mean, this is a gold mine. Again, if you're a fan of like Virginia Woolf and how she talks about women, Simone de Beauvoir's fiction, the Outline trilogy by Rachel Cusk, all of these themes, but I'm going to get into a little bit later, but the way that Lispector in particular writes about these common themes that we see across literature, especially written by women, she just has her own voice. It's just so good. So what does our main character decide to do about all this? So with all of this focus on Joanna seeking a way to reconcile herself and the beast, Lispector ties everything together with this overarching theme of rebirth. There is a lot of egg imagery paired with images of the sea and Joanna submerged in water. One, I couldn't help but think, I would say one couldn't help, but I really couldn't help think about the religious connotations or the religious image, especially in Christianity, of water baptism, and how water baptism, this dipping into water and then being coming up out of the water, symbolizes a spiritual rebirth, a reawakening, a rebirthing of one's own soul. You've been transformed. So there are so many references to the sea, to eggs, to water, that you could spend, I don't know how much time just digging into those images alone. But also, it made me nostalgic for Iris Murdoch's novel, The Sea. The way that the sea is described in both of these novels is very similar, because in this book, Lispector discusses the various phases of the sea, the stages of the sea: still water, water that's churned up, the beach, the water in all its forms, if you store, and how the weather plays into that. Iris Murdoch is the same way in The Sea. The way, the current state of the ocean, the current state of the sea is a deeper symbolic meaning for something else. You could spend so much time just analyzing the sea imagery and the state in which the sea is described in this book. I actually think that Iris Murdoch's The Sea and this book would be excellent companion reads. So here are a couple of quotes. When she emerges from the tub, she is a stranger who doesn't know what to feel. There is nothing around her and she recognizes nothing. Before I was closed, but when I stood up, It was as if I had been born of the water. I came out wet, clothes clinging to my skin, hair shining down. Something or other stirred in me, and it was no doubt just my body. But in a sweet miracle, everything had become transparent, and it was no doubt my soul too. I'm actually going to wrap it up there. This novel was a little intimidating to review, and it took me a while after I finished reading it. I read it in February. It took me a while after I finished reading it to let it marinate. And then I had to, take time to outline it, go back over my annotations, and have things kind of click into place. And there's just so much more I didn't talk about. There are so many things and images that she uses. There's a lot of religious imagery. She talks a lot about God. There's a lot of music, references to music and notes. It's just this book. I almost had to let me pick a couple things and talk about those, because it's just, you could write a dissertation on this novel alone, and it's under 200 pages. I am convinced that Clarice Lispector was a genius because her writing is stunning. These are the words. Let me backtrack. These are the words that come to my mind when I think of how to describe her writing: ethereal, lucid, dreamlike, cryptic, abstract, poetic, dense. I do not think Lispector is light reading, but she's worth the effort. Every word is precise and significant. There are so many meaningful things that I just, you can't grasp it all in one reading. And again, I purposely had to leave things out just for the sake of time, and also because I couldn't grasp it all. There's just no way that you can grasp it all in one sitting, in one reading. Like I said, music is mentioned a lot. God is mentioned a lot, among so many others. Lispector forced me to focus. Yes, she's one of those authors that will make you a better reader because she forces you to slow down. If you can read Proust, you can read Lispector. I actually found Lispector to be more abstract than Proust. Yeah, and I don't mean that in a bad way. She is one of those authors that's going to make you a better reader. I really look forward to reading more of her work. She's one of the great ones. What I will say is her novels are not thick. These are not 300, 400, 500 page books. Most of her novels are like less than 200 pages. But in a way, with Near to the Wild Heart, 200 pages was all I could process. Let me get the book again. This edition in particular is 194 pages, and you can see how much I tabbed this book, and it's less than 200 pages. It's just, you can't grasp everything, and that's a good thing. She's forcing me to revisit her. Yeah, she's dense and philosophical, and there's a lot to muse over. I know I missed stuff, and I pick up on stuff pretty quickly, but she is one of those authors where I feel like I had to take, I'm a faster reader. I feel like I'm all over the place. I've become a faster reader just over time, but I had to slow down a little bit with her. And so I actually found that after about 20 pages of her, I had to take a break and put her aside for the next day. So I could only really take about 20 pages at a time because I just had to think about what she was telling me and the way that she was saying it. The prose is just phenomenal. Her metaphors, genius. I'm going to stop. I rated this a 4.5 out of 5. Really phenomenal. Again, if you like dense lit, really poetic literature, if you like a reading challenge, yeah. If you liked Proust, Kafka, the existentialists, Woolf, she should be on the shelf right next to all of the great ones. She is one of the great ones. I can see why Brazil has said no. This our homegirl right here. I see it. She's phenomenal. Yeah, I'm done. I'm done. She gives your brain. She makes you do mental push-ups. We're done talking. So, have you read Clarice Lispector? What are your thoughts on her? If you haven't read her yet, is she on your TBR? And I think that if you haven't read her yet, and maybe you're feeling a little intimidated, don't. Just dive right in, but take your time. You know, she's one of those ones that you could just read a few pages and just muse over and kind of take it slowly. I think she's one of those authors that's best taken slowly. But again, she's going to make you a better reader. Please feel free to leave me a comment. And I've read Near to the Wild Heart. I picked that in particular as my introduction into Lispector because it's her first novel. It was her first novel. She wrote that in her 20s. I mean, unreal. Which one would you recommend I read next? I actually have a collection of a volume. It's about 700 pages of her shorter works and some of her journalistic writings. So that's actually going to be the next Lispector that I read when I get around to that. But what would you recommend, you Lispector fans, should be the next novel that I pick up? Please feel free to follow me on Instagram, where I get up to more book of shenanigans. All of my reviews go there first. Also, on Instagram, I post my monthly TBR lists and my monthly wrap-ups. If you're curious to read. If you're curious to know what I'm reading on a monthly basis, my reviews, like I said, also go live there first. I am going to wrap it up. Please feel free to like and subscribe. My brain is feeling really slow today, or this session of sitting down to record videos. I don't know why. Maybe it's the weather. The weather's dodgy. There's a train. The weather's dodgy. It's humid. It's sticky. I don't know. Anyway, I'm out. I'm battling. Bye.